Very beautifully, Bhagavatam realigns tradition. Bhagavatam is a revolutionary book, if I can use the word book. It revolutionizes stuff, you see. And the beauty with Sanatana Dharma is a revolution over time becomes a tradition, you see. That's the beauty of Sanatana Dharma. That's why we keep getting spiritual revolutionalists coming every now and then. They shake it up. And the tradition follows from the shake up. The first one to shake up this tradition in our historic times is Bhagavan Buddha himself. Though some people attach him to Sanatana Dharma, some don't. The first person to really create a spiritual revolution in Bharat, and the Bhagavatam holds Buddha Avatara as an avatar of Vishnu, so obviously he's a part of Sanatana Dharma. This Buddha Bhagavan came and suddenly created a revolution. He was dead against people who could not properly understand the perfect essence of scriptures, and they were more directed by just parroting, imitating. He hated imitation, so he realized they didn't understand the purpose of Vedas, and they are misusing Vedas. So what our Buddha Bhagavan did was, he wanted to dissociate these people from corrupting the Vedas. You understand what I'm saying? The Vedas are there for a very high purpose. Upanishads are there for a very high purpose. And people were deriding its purpose. They were bringing it down. And so the best way for us to protect its purity is put a blame on it itself. For example, if a child which is just 1 year old, this is what you will find in typical Indian household. If there is a say for example, something which is chewed on, what you call chewing gum, right? You have chewing gum, and of course it can be relished by elders. I'm not trying to promote chewing gum here. I'm just trying to give you an example. I don't chew gum, by the way. So here, a child comes close to a chewing gum and it is about to swallow a chewing gum. Now, this chewing gum cannot be properly relished by the child. The child is going to be negatively impacted by the chewing gum. The chewing gum is going to be wasted by this child. So, what will the mother say? The mother will say, yeah, this chewing gum is dirty, throw it. Huh? And the child, looking at the mother, will throw the chewing gum because it thinks it's dirty. Why should I take it? No, chewing gum is not dirty. It is dirt. It is labeled dirty because the mother does not want this child, which is not ready, to start chewing that gum. So some of the Mahatmas said Buddha Bhagavan did the exact thing. These people who did not understand the value of Vedas, people who did not understand the value of Upanishads, people who wanted to misuse it and abuse it, needed to be separated from this. So what Buddha Bhagavan did as a stroke of genius is, he totally denied Vedas. He totally denied it and said, why are you following something else? And be a light unto yourself. You see, said Buddha. But then, how many followed his advice, we don't know. They did exactly what he told not to do. He said, don't follow anybody. And they built the biggest temples for Buddha. He said, don't do any image worship. And they created the biggest statues for Buddha. And he says, don't go by anybody's words. And they made a religion out of Buddhism. You see? And he was the first revolutionary. But then a tradition followed from a revolution. And since Buddha Bhagavan separated the Vedas and the miscreants who tried to sort of play around, misuse, abuse it, now Vedas needed protection now. For that, a second revolutionary, a second descent of divinity, if you please, and it came. And for us who are Sanatana Dharmis, we hold him to be the first Acharya. So he is called Adi Shankara Acharya. And our Bhagavad Pada, Adi Shankara Bhagavad Pada, he came and he established the supreme authority of the Vedas. And then he wrote commentaries for all the Vedas. And then he did a revolution. In those days, there were no concepts of something called mutt. You know what mutt is, right? Mutt means a place where all these monks etc. live. We call monastery now. Let us assume mutt is something close to monastery. These sannyasis are never supposed to stay in one place for more than a week, right? But then Adi Shankara Bhagavad created a revolution. He understood for Sanatana Dharma to sustain, there got to be an organization. You see, this whole concept of organization is very foreign to renunciants. People who renounce and sannyasis are not supposed to be organized at all. But then there was a need of the hour for an organization, for a center, for proliferation, for spreading Sanatana Dharma. So the first revolution Adi Shankara Bhagavad did was to establish 4 centers or 5 centers all over India, cutting across the length and breadth of India. Imagine Dwaraka, and then there is one in Puri, and there is one in Badri, and there is one in Kanchi and Sharada Peetham in Sringeri. So he covered the length and breadth of India. Badri is the northernmost part almost. Dwaraka is the westernmost part. Puri is the easternmost part. And of course, Sringeri and Kanchi are in the southernmost part of India. He created centers where he put a sannyasi, he put a renunciant there, and they were supposed to understand and proliferate and live, more importantly, the principles which actually espouse our Vedas. You see? And that is the first revolution he did. And then a tradition formed from it. And then came Bhagavat Ramanujacharya. You all know Bhagavat Ramanujacharya, another great revolutionary. Generally, when people talk philosophy, they wouldn't want any relish to come in between. Bhakti is something kept a little away from all these philosophical discussions. Bhagavat Ramanuja brought in the wonderful element of love, wonderful element of aesthetics into philosophical discussions. And he said, don't just talk about dry philosophy. Have this wonderful, essence of bhakti along with philosophy. And he brought a very simple way, very difficult concepts, very rare concepts, very subtle concepts, cannot be grasped by all. And for that, he showed there is a simple way for you to relate to divinity, and he showed the process of temple worship. If there are temples in India today and they are flourishing with a proper procedure, believe me, whether it is a temple in Dwaraka or a temple in Vrindavana or a temple in Puri or anywhere in this Bharata Varsha, in some way or the other, they owe it to this great Mahapurusha called Ramanujacharya for its sustenance, because he showed the beauty of worshipping deities in temple. And we don't call it statue, we don't call it image, because when you look at a child, nobody looks at a child or a baby as a composite of about 200 grams of skin, 10 liters of blood, and about 8 pounds of flesh. Is that how you see a baby? Is the baby not all this? But have you ever seen a baby like this? You see, we can't now. So likewise, Bhagavat Ramanujacharya said, if you want to know the highest truth, if you want to experience that, whatever word you want, experience the anubhava of divine wisdom, love, aesthetics, joy in your heart, don't separate divinity from the deity in the temple. Look at the divinity in the deity. The moment you separate these two, it's like separating a child and all the constituents of a child. How horrible it sounds. How you call in Tamil Katamranditanam. And that's what is the equivalence in divinity when we start thinking the deity in the temple as a mere stone or a mere image. Even telling it as a matter of fact is something I truly cringe. But since I'm explaining, I beg for the divine forgiveness. So here, that's the beauty, Ramanujacharya, revolution. And they were a very rigid system of these type of people doing these type of work should not enter into the temple, etc. He broke all those barriers. He said, this is the Lord of the entire world. This is the mother of the universe. How dare you stop them? Send them in. And of course, everybody need not cook, but the food has to be served to everybody. If everybody starts cooking, you all know this famous, oft repeated proverb: too many cooks spoil the broth. Na? But the cooked food should be available for everybody. So he gave proper, see, medical field is available for everybody. But if I feel like doing an operation, then I'm not ready. Na? There are people who know how to wield a scalpel. They've been trained and they have the skills and aptitude for that. They do the operation to be successful. Likewise, he gave a code of ethics saying that this is your way of life. And this way of life, if you follow, then come, touch the deity, do the puja. But the benefit of the deity showering its grace should be available to everybody in the society. Allow everybody to come and have darshan. To do puja, there are rules and regulations. For us to use our national health service in, say, UK or our government hospitals in India, every citizen has a right. But to treat a patient, only people trained for it has to treat. Na? Likewise, he said, let the benefit of temples be available to everybody. But the people who need to actually ensure divinity in the temple have to be trained, have to lead a way of life. That's very stringent. And the benefit is for everybody. Somebody plants a seed, takes care of the tree, but the fruits are for everybody. So that's the whole system of trying to make sure that we protect the temple worship. Now, temple is not a social place. You see, temple is a place where uh, we want to ensure that the spiritual presence is enhanced over time. That's the whole idea. You see, and our Swamiji very beautifully uh, practicalized what Bhagavatam said. Bhagavatam said, in current times, the best way to enhance spiritual presence is by repeating the divine name. The divine name has the power. The best way to enhance the presence of deity is by devotion. The best way to enhance the presence of a deity is by celebrating, obviously. So that's the whole concept of Namadwar, which is a crossover between a bhajan mat and a temple. It does not have the rigors of temple worship, and it is not as freelancing as bhajan mat. So we have a lovely crossover. That's our Swamiji's revolution, where we brought in a Namadwar, where the presence of deity is initially blessed by a Mahatma, which is our Guru, but the sustenance of the presence, called Sanidhyam, is done by the divine name. And that I am sure your generation or 10 generations from you can sustain. If I say you have to chant only Vedic chants without making even a single mistake, how many of us can do that in US, you tell me? You see? And that is the reason why he made it. This is a revolution, you see? Because Namadwar is a revolution. There is no doubt about it. But you will see that a tradition will follow this. You see? People will follow a tradition from this until maybe after 500, 600 years, another Mahatma will come and shake it up a bit, bring in a new revolution. Tradition will follow. But remember, what revolution Buddha Bhagavan did, to this day, tradition exists. What revolution Adi Shankara Bhagavad did, to this day, there are people called Advaitis or whatever they call themselves, and they continue the tradition. Bhagavat Ramanujacharya's tradition called Sri Vaishnavas, they are still there and they will continue to remain. And then came Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he shook up everything. And to this day, there will be people who follow the tradition of Mahaprabhu, they are called Gaudiyas. You see, he came from Bengal, it's called Gaudadesh. So they are all called Gaudiya Vaishnavas. You see, and like that, our Swamiji has created a revolution. And there is Namadwar, there is Mahamantra chanting. There will be a tradition which follows that. Nobody can stop that. And will that be all? No. There will be more Mahatmas to come. There will be more different hues and beautiful varieties of our Sanatana Dharma, which will be explored by Mahatmas. It's a never ending, lovely journey. And we are all fortunate to be living during the time of such a great revolution being happening. And when I say revolution, I take it in a very positive sense. I know the word revolution creates a lot of different images. I'm talking about shaking up for the betterment of the spiritual health of the society type of a revolution. And so all this keeps happening. So revolution, tradition. And why we were telling all this is Bhagavatam is a revolution. I mean, Bhagavatam revolutionized spirituality about 5,000 years back. And most of the other revolutions are like a small sub-rivers from this big downpour of Bhagavatam. And I'll tell you why Bhagavatam is a revolution for many reasons.